Welcome, fellow travelers, to the Good Book Club. We ask good questions to ask.
Keep the conversation alive about God.
Thank you for,
There we
for
go.
saving that.
We're now at chapter 11, which is the death of Lazarus. Oh, sorry.
Spoilers.
It actually spoils it right here in the subtitle. Sometimes I think that if you want to read the Bible new and you don't know anything, the Bible kind of spoils itself because it has those subtitles or those headings. But anyway, Lazarus we read about in John 11 and 12. We don't read about him anywhere else except for Luke 16, but that's a different Lazarus, a poor man that was in a parable that Jesus told, but this is a different Lazarus just to distinguish. And Lazarus had two sisters. What were their names?
What were their names? I remember Lazarus was a friend of Jesus, and yeah, the sisters is not Martha.
It's Martha and...
Martha.
Why did you say that name? Martha! Batman versus Superman.
Martha.
You,
Oh no.
Martha,
what
Lazarus.
was Lazarus and
Mary.
Mary.
Every time I hear Mary, then I think of Jesus' mother.
Yeah, there was more than one Mary.
Yeah, of
but
course.
Yeah, that's the main Mary.
The main Mary.
The main Mary.
The MM.
Eminem.
Mary.
Anyway, they were two sisters and a brother, and Lazarus got sick, and people told Jesus that Lazarus is sick, and he actually says, Jesus says, this will not end in death, but for the glory of God. Then, weird enough, Lazarus does die, and he didn't live too far from them. It was about 2 or 3 kilometers away. Walking distance, literally. And he waited longer on purpose, and he told his disciples, Lazarus has fallen asleep. They take it literally and said, well, if that's true, he's just going to wake up. And then he just plainly says, he's dead. And we're going to go to him now. And even Thomas, who's also called Didymus, which means twin, but I don't know if he actually had a twin, but he was willing to die with Jesus because they were concerned about the fact that, Lord, they just wanted to stone you recently. Do you really want to go back? And Jesus said, yes, we're definitely going. And then they get to Martha and Mary. What happened then?
So they were talking, well, didn't they cry on their knees with Jesus? Well,
Mary
a bit later.
Mary did, but later.
Martha comes to Jesus first.
Yeah, and they did say that they believe that the Lord and Savior is here, who is Jesus. So because they believe, Jesus said, or went to go and heal Lazarus, or not heal Lazarus, rise him from the dead. He's very much dead.
And why does the Bible say in verse 17 that Lazarus has been in a tomb for 4 days? What's the significance of 4 days being dead?
Well, if you go into technical aspects with body decomposition, on the 3rd day your organs go all bubbly and
Your organs decompose, and by day 5 you start to boogly bloat up.
Yeah, you bloat up on day 5, so it's in between those days. So he's about to blow up from the inside out. Prepping for
gross.
that. Anyways, but it's on the 4th day before all of that. So
what was the other significance?
The other significance, Jesus will rise up. They say on the 3rd day, but that was the 4th day.
No, this story specifically.
The spiritual significance.
Spiritual significance. Oh, that.
Do you remember?
No, I don't remember, except for that Jesus can show that he has the power over death and life.
Definitely. That's the whole purpose of this miracle. But the significance of the 4 days, the Jews, for some reason, thought that you have up to 3 days, then you can get resurrected again. So for somebody to be dead at least 4 days or more, they're too far gone. That's what they thought, so it seemed impossible that Lazarus would come back. And Martha meets Jesus, and she said, Lord, if you had been here earlier, my brother would not have been dead. If I have it right, that's what she Yes, she did say that in verse 21 and 22. And Jesus says, your brother will rise again. And she said, yes, I know he will rise in the resurrection at the last day, which refers to the resurrection still to come. We talked about it in John 5 and 6. And that is the future resurrection when Jesus returns. And then Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, he will live. And this talks about the fact that Jesus makes us pass from death to life, and we have eternal life in him, and we have part in the fact that our bodies, we who believe, will be resurrected and glorified, new bodies. So he says that he is the resurrection and life, and you just said it. He has power over life and death.
Yeah, and again, like the previous chapter, he was with the blind man. So
No,
he,
that's chapter 9.
chapter 9. He goes to the extreme by doing something extra, and here he goes again further than what is believed. So he pushes the boundaries of people's belief.
Exactly. And after this, she said, he asks her, do you believe this? And she said, yes, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who is to come into the world. And then they call Mary, and she also comes out there, and she falls at Jesus' feet, and she says the same, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And as Jesus saw her weeping and everybody else, he was actually moved in his spirit and troubled, and asks, where have you laid him? And they said, come and see. And then we have the shortest verse in the entire Bible, Jesus wept.
Depends on what translation you read.
Yeah. But let's stick to this translation, for example, Jesus wept. Why do you think Jesus cried?
It is because he is also the Son of Man, so he is human, so he is able to experience the feelings that we're experiencing. And Lazarus was also a friend of his, and you can see the people around him, how much they suffer from someone who's dead, someone who died, friend, family member, and maybe an enemy, but I don't think any enemies are nearby at the moment. But also, he waited purposefully longer. He waited up to 4 days when he's very much dead in order to just show this miracle of he has the power over life and death. The extreme that he has to go through in order to do something.
Yeah, everyone was like, they thought he was far gone. Their hopes were low. They were like entering the grieving stage because they probably held out hope that Jesus would come before the 3rd day is finished. Whoa, I'm only clicking now. They were like sad.
Yeah.
Sure.
So Jesus waited longer on purpose. He actually says earlier that I'm glad I wasn't there so that God may be glorified. And it's wonderful because that word wept, if you look it up on the Greek, it means to shed tears softly. So Jesus did actually weep and cry. And it makes sense to me because he has a heart for people, he cares for us. And it just shows that he knows what it feels like to lose a friend. And he also lost his cousin, John the Baptist, and he mourned his death as well. And it's actually amazing if you think about it that Jesus is the only God out of all the other religions out there that actually knows what it feels like to be human, because he became human through Jesus. And the wonderful thing is he knows what it feels like to cry over a friend.
Someone mentioned that if all the other gods exist, the reason why Jesus is the ultimate God is because he went from being a God to be able to relate with us, to bring us up with him up there, while all the other gods and other religions are, you'll never reach them.
Look how powerful I am.
Because remember, Jesus is always the only living God. And when he came down to earth, he was still fully God and still fully man.
Yes.
But definitely, he's the one who became human so that he can relate with us. And I can't think of another God that actually did that. That's what makes Christianity actually stand out, if you think about it. And someone nearby asked, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind, chapter 9, have kept this man from dying? That's what people thought. And in the very next verse, it says, Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. I always thought this meant that he got sad again, but then we found out that he was moved with indignation, which can also be translated as anger, which I found very interesting when we talked about it yesterday. And it makes sense because when you're mourning, there's also anger when you mourn. But we also thought that Jesus might have been angry or he had indignation because he might have been angry and troubled and bothered by the fact that people struggle to believe.
People
That could
struggle
have
to
been-
believe, and that the people just in the verse before that said he heal the blind. He made a blind man see, so he could have prevented the death. And they're not thinking further, as he references, as we reference back to the other chapters. How would you understand heavenly things if you don't understand earthly things? And it's, again, with the belief of you only believe as much as you see, and then you make your own interpretations. Well, you should actually not limit yourself to that. That's why we struggle to reach our full potential, because Jesus said we can do the same as he did and more, but we limit ourselves the whole time.
And Tim was actually referring to John 14 there. So almost there,
Ooh,
Foreshadowing.
just like Jesus did.
Yeah. Didn't Jesus tell them something? Like after they were talking behind him, like didn't he
Well,
say something like in response?
no.
No.
He just said, take away the stone.
that looks like a big block of cheese.
Brie cheese.
There will be a picture right here that you will
Ding.
see. There we go. There it is. That's what the graves looked like. It was a cave of a stone covering the entrance, was a common burial place. And if you think about it, someone mentioned it yesterday in our chat, was that this feels like a reference. And yes, it's actually a build-up to Jesus' own resurrection. And that would be then an even bigger miracle, that after a crucifixion, probably the most horrifying way to die ever, and
Bleeding
most
out as well.
bleeding out as well, is links to his upcoming miracle of his own resurrection. And after they rolled the stone away, Martha was actually bothered by the fact that it was already 4 days. She thought he's going to smell bad, and Jesus says, did I not tell you that if you believe you will see the glory of God? And they took away the stone, and Jesus looked up and he thanked the Father that he hears him and that he always hears him and that he's there so that everybody can believe. And then after he said this, he said in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And then Lazarus from the grave stood up and walked towards them while being in his linen clothes. So it was like a mummy walking out. And then he says, take off the grave clothes and let him go. And what I said to the group yesterday, what I felt in that moment sort of a revelation, is a spiritual connection that when you are raised from the death of sin, then you take off those clothes and you go away. And that's what Jesus does for us. We are raised with him, just like we died with him. And then I saw this as a picture of that, which was quite cool to me. And this ended up being one of the biggest miracles Jesus ever did, raising a man from the dead. And he also raised, in Mark 5, man's daughter, Jairus' daughter. And there's another part, I think it's Luke 7, he raised a widow's son. But this one was especially significant because it was 4 days. He was dead, and he made him alive.
Very dead.
Yeah. And Jesus was able to do that, showing he has power over life and death, which he does mention in chapter 10, now that I think about it. So,
True.
True. Did you want to mention anything about the story of Lazarus?
So that's it.
Yeah, that's Lazarus, but there's still another part left of the chapter.
I think we can get to the plotting scene.
Okay, so the plotting scene was the Pharisees, who had been in conflict with Jesus this whole time. They were especially now worried of what is going to happen because Jesus just raised the man from the dead after 4 days. That's a new record. And they thought that there's going to be rebellion, and the Romans would then stop their religion, stop their temple, break it down, and it would stop. And then Caiaphas, who was Caiaphas?
He is a politician.
No. I did not see that one coming.
Close. He was a priest.
What kind of priest?
The high priest of the year, or he was elected in that year.
I don't know if he was elected in that year, but he was a high priest from AD 18 to 36.
So
This was about AD 33, because Jesus was about 33 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't there? Okay, I'm gonna look at my Bible again.
Okay. So, the high priest, do you remember what was the purpose of a high priest?
Being a high priest.
Top dog.
No. What did they do? Did I ever tell you?
No, you,
Oh, shoot.
He
I'm so
told
sorry.
all the other priests what to do.
Well, technically, that's not...
Far off.
That's not
It's not wrong.
That's not wrong, but obviously there's more to it. Basically, a high priest was the one who went into the Holy of Holies, the most holy place.
into the tent, and if you're not holy enough, you would
You
be.
die.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But they
some would
actually
say
die.
Yes.
But you have these
By
things that you have to
murder?
do.
No, I'll tell you now.
Isn't it also a reference back to Exodus?
Yes.
Yeah.
Again.
The thing that
Exodus.
the ark.
The Ark of the Covenant was inside the Holy of Holies.
How did they die though?
So
they
how it
just died.
happened? No.
No.
How it happened was the high priest went in once a year. He had to wear certain types of clothes. I can't remember where in Exodus or the details. I think Leviticus also definitely explains it in more detail. But they would actually get this, wrap a rope around their leg, and it would have bells in it. Then he would go in, and they would hear the bells ringing to know, okay, he's still fine. But if he does die, if he, for example, went in and he wasn't cleansed beforehand of his sin, then he would have died in God's holy presence, and then they would have pulled him out with that rope, literally.
So
Pulled him out with the rope, and then like, okay, who's the next high priest?
listen for the bells. You won't hear the thump.
No, but then he dies, and then when they pull him back, the bells are gonna move again.
Yeah, so that's horrifying.
But I'm
But it's
thinking,
true.
well, if he dies and stumbles stuff over and everything falls over, what do you do then? Because it was dark in there as well, wasn't
I
it?
think there was a candle,
But who went to lit the candle?
the high priest.
That's a good question. But
How
back
did you
to
see where the candle?
okay, but back to Caiaphas, who didn't die.
Back to John. We can think about Exodus when we get to Exodus.
Yeah, we're going to do that actually.
Okay.
Very excited. But anyway, Caiaphas, the high priest, had the responsibility of making amends between God and the nations, so they were very important. Jesus is obviously our high priest, and then Caiaphas says that it is better that one person die instead of the entire nation, and he was actually prophesying about Jesus' sacrifice, which obviously did happen. It actually says in verse 51, he did not say this on his own, but as high priest, he prophesied of Jesus' death. And from there on, they plotted to take his life. And that's the reason why Jesus didn't move publicly, especially among Judea. So he withdrew to a region near the wilderness.
I have a quick question.
Mm.
So, the high priest was plotting to kill Jesus. Am I correct?
Along with the others, yes.
All right. So, if he went to get cleansed to talk to God, what will happen? Well, actually, God forgives. So,
Wait a minute.
Whoa.
This was just before the crucifixion. And in the other Gospels, you actually read that when Jesus died, the robe, the curtains that separated the Holy from the Holy of Holies tore in two, showing that we can access God's presence. And then Caiaphas most likely saw that happen.
Whoa, so then he didn't have to go through that anymore.
Yeah, but he must have been confused. What does this mean?
that's why he
Sure.
wasn't the high priest anymore.
Well, after 3 years, he stopped being the high priest. I don't know why.
We can later on figure out
Yeah.
why.
But I just realized Caiaphas was likely the one who saw that happen. The curtains being torn.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And you can also
Witnessing that.
think about it that when people mourned, the Jewish people, they would tear their clothes to show that their hearts are torn.
Yeah.
So that also, the tearing of the curtains means that we can access God's holy presence through Jesus. So there's nothing that separates us from God's presence because Jesus made a way. But think about this: the father lost his son. So was that also
God
mourning?
mourned.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I was thinking that right before you said
Yeah.
it. That's,
God mourning.
that's crazy.
There's actually a video that I don't know if you guys ever saw it, but it's really good. It's about how God sacrificed his son Jesus, but it's portrayed with a story of a father and a son and a train. It's actually really sad, but we'll link it in the description. It's extremely good. It really makes you sad when you watch it, but it refers to Jesus and how the father must have felt when Jesus died. And Jesus withdrew to a village near Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. And at that time, it was almost the Jewish Passover, and the people were getting ready for the ceremonial cleansing. And they kept looking for Jesus as he stood in the temple, asked him, "What do you think? Is he coming to the festival or not?" And the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report to it so that he might get arrested. So the stakes are high. Jesus had to hide, and if he was there in the public, he would have gotten arrested. And he does get arrested in chapter 18. Sorry, spoilers. But
So his disguise ability doesn't work that well anymore. It has worn off.
Well, funny enough, chapter 12, he does appear riding on a donkey, but then from there, he was spending time with his disciples alone. The Thursday night goes into a lot of detail, and then it was Friday where he died. Saturday was silent.
You're going quite ahead now.
But he chose. It's not like his
chose.
ability went away. He chooses when to be seen and not to be seen because he would escape so easily from people. So he was like, okay, it's time. See me now. Here I am.
So the next few chapters I'm really excited about. I think I say that for almost every single one of them because I really like John. Chapter 12 is very cool. There's a very cool thing that happens that we're going to talk about when we get there. But as for now, that is John chapter 11. Let's clink. Cheers.
Clunk.
Clink.
Clunk.
Clunk.
And we will see you in the next episode.